Alrighty. It is Worldbuilding Wednesday, and we are dragging ourselves through more world building, focusing this evening on education, educational systems in both fantasy and sci-fi fantasy world settings. So, going to sit here and kind of go over some stuff and come up with a plan if we can that hopefully makes sense. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull my map up just to have a little background here besides the big start a game box. Fantasy map first, and then the sci-fi map. And let's flip back to the fantasy map. And let's see why. Work area, no. Game capture. Mode auto. Capture. Specific window. No, we want to capture Worldographer if we can. And apparently we can't. I love when Worldographer and Streamlabs Desktop like to fight with one another. There is always something. There it goes. And then let me tweak this back. Okay. So that at least gets our map up for discussion. And pardon me while I adjust the camera just for kicks and giggles. Okay, what's locked, what's unlocked here? Alrighty, so let's talk out some fantasy education systems. You know, I think, you know, you want some education going on in a fantasy setting. I think kind of primary education up to about 4th grade is kind of going to be it for the bulk of society. Your basic education extending beyond that primary education is going to extend in your larger cities or to your wealthier families. So I'm thinking that is, you know, we'll consider primary education kind of like maybe a by decree in specific kingdoms, and basic education beyond that being optional. And then likewise college and university being optional. So I'm kind of picturing this as a I won't say pre-literate society because they're going to know how to read and write and do basic math, but just thinking it through. You know, if you've got a family that's got children and has a business, chances are those children are going to be under the employ or in the employ of the business, be it a farm or a shop or, you know, even basic trades type stuff, which we'll come back to that in an additional conversation here in a minute. So my thought process is to basically say that primary education is going to be, you know, defined in this case by the empire and by the colonial remnant to be a requirement, and then it'll be up to individual city-states to determine how that is implemented, what kind of scheduling looks like, is it half day, full day. I'm not going to get overly detailed in this, just because I don't see a need to in terms of really either one of these game systems. But it was one of those things that was in the 30-day World Building Kit uh, by Angeline Trevina. Is it Angeline? I want to say it's Angeline. Let me check. Angeline Trevina, yeah. I didn't want to mangle her first name. So I'm going to include it for that purpose, just out of thoroughness and trying to get this done. Oh, here comes a girl dog to visit me. But it's not something that's going to come up in campaign regularly that I can see. Yeah, if anybody asks, it's there, but we're not going to tout it and trumpet and go crazy with it. Let's see what happens. Beyond your beyond your traditional education system, I think it's important to look at, is magic going to be taught? Well, for the most part, magic is going to be banned as a education subject in the basic education system, because I mean not everybody has magic capabilities. I think we're gonna make that kind of a setting thing, but there will be specialist schools for magic. We'll call them academies or whatever you want to call. But then you'll also have your religious schools, which is going to be the training of your priests and healers. So we'll say for sorcerers, wizards, religion is going to be your clerics and healers. So that raises the question of warlocks. Since warlocks typically draw their power from a pact with a supernatural creature, are they going to be a fail out of the religious academies? Let's put a question mark on that. But beyond this setting, your guilds. And I'm going to go ahead and start rattling off guild types just because I feel the need to try to be as thorough as possible about this. So obviously your stonemasons. Oh, your carpenters. Wheelwrights. Because, the wheel is a thing. Innkeepers. Bar keeps. Tanners / leather workers. Blacksmith. We're going to treat armorers, weaponsmith, as different from blacksmithing because it is more of a specialization. Your alchemists, your tailors. Oh, let's see. Cooks, miners. Your fishermen and sailors. Beyond that, let's see your scriveners, your scribes. Is scrivener the proper word? Performers, apothecary, and physicians. A lot of that back in the day was your barbers. They did the bloodletting and the leeching and the stuff of that nature. Um, glaziers, that's your glaziers, and then your potters, jewelers. We had wheelwrights, but we need to do our shipwrights. Your distillers and vintners. Distillers, vintners, if I can spell it right, vintners and brewers. That's all going to be one guild. Three different fragments, but the same guild. Do your butchers and your hunters really need to be in a guild? I don't know, but let's do a merchants guild, just a general merchants guild. You'll have your specialized ones like your jewelers, your potters, your glaziers, that kind of thing. But your general merchants, I think, need to be in a guild of their own. I don't know that we want to do place like farriers and your stable masters in a guild. I think, yeah, that'll be a trade. But I don't know that. Well, yeah, it might be it, but might be an apprenticeship. But I don't think that it's going to be an actual guild. And last but not least, let's put the Thieves Guild on here. And we're going to say from your 15th year to maybe your 20th year for your apprenticeship, because you know the person sponsoring you or doing the teaching of you has got to get something in return. So basically you're in a I won't say an indentured servitude type of setting, but I mean you're basically going to be working for a master stonemason or carpenter or wright or a keep or smith or one of these other type of trades as part of your your training. So I think that covers a lot of that. I think for your specialist schools, for your magic and religion, they're going to want at least primary education completed. I mean, you've got to be able to read and write. And in the case of magic, you've got to be able to do some math if you're making potions. Now, that would come over more into like your alchemist conversation, though, type 2. But, you know, your alchemists are going to be responsible for things other than like healing potions and stuff like that. They're going to be your alchemist fire and things of that nature. Things that go boom if you don't mix them right. I could see maybe a bard school in here as well. Although I don't know that a bard school or college is going to be highly pursued, and I don't see it requiring anything more than a basic education, but just something to think about and bounce around. What other schools can we think about in this type of setting? Well, let me think. I'm not getting to get into the details of what the school day looks like or a school year and literacy rates and that type of stuff, because I think we're getting off the track. I don't want to rebuild the a modern education system in a game environment. Sorry, that's just not my cup of tea. Um, I just think that's overkill. I guess the conversation about literacy and books versus scrolls. I mean, that raises the conversation. Has the printing press been invented? I mean, rudimentary books would be handwritten and stitched or sewn together. But in the case of a mass produced basic education system, are we going to look at having the printing press exist? Stuff I got to think about, and I can't really answer that question, but it is a question that needs to be at least thought of, if not acknowledged, and kind of addressed or ignored as you as you please. Um, what about um, you know the military? Are we going to have, in the case of kingdoms and city states, you got to have a standing military for defense? So I would consider that a specialist school. Military, militant orders. And there can be some overlap in here. You can have a church that has a militant arm, kind of like the Catholic Church had the Church Knights. Or if you want to jump into a good example here would be David Eddings' book series, The Elenium and the Tumuli, the first and the second series, where in his setting of Elenia, you had the Church of Elenia, which was monotheistic, and they had the four orders of the Church Knights, and so I could see that being kind of some overlap between your religious schools if they have a militant order as part of their actual organized religion. Outside of that, your the imperial setting is going to have the imperial army. So I think that's going to be your Roman Empire type settings where you have a formal education for your military, for your soldiery. What other areas, while we're thinking outside the box here, would be appropriate in terms of an academy or specialist system? What about like your artificers, which are going to be kind of a combination of tinkers and magic? That's a question mark. Artificers? Or would artificers be, I think they would be so few in number that it would be more of a apprenticeship type thing, where you basically have a person who is a tinker with some spell casting capability. They're kind of going to be, are they going to be rejected from both formal structures, both from the Magic Academy and from a guild? Some things to think about, things to weigh in on. Or are artificers going to come by their trade as a combination of experimenting and with tinkering and experimenting with magic? Now that raises even more questions. I know, I'm just digging more holes here. So, looking at a a element of my homebrew and taking a look at like Critical Role and just D&D in general. You know, Matt Mercer created a gunslinger class, um, but it's a subclass of a fighter. But if you look at or you follow Critical Role, then you'll know that Percival de Rollo the Third of Vox Machina was a noble-born son with a noble's education, but he, even though he's a fighter, he was basically more of a tinker when he developed his firearms. So I'm leaning in my campaign or my homebrew environment. Let me get a drink here because I'm drying out real fast. To think of a gunfighter or a gunsmith, as we may call him in my campaign. It's not been determined yet. I would see that more of a artificer specialization than a fighter specialization, because the firearms are going to be so few in number and so specialized in design that I think you're going to escape the capabilities of a fighter, but I think that is a good fit for an artificer. And there might even be some magic involved in the creation of what would be the fantasy equivalent of our, at least in my campaign, of black powder. You know, maybe there is some spell casting involved in the forging of the barrel in order to reinforce it to withstand containing an explosion for discharging a projectile. So, and maybe in the case of projectiles, it would be like magicked sling stones. You know, you could use a thunderstone in a sling and fire that into a mass and detonate a thunder wave, or So I think there's some capabilities there with magicking the weapon. You know, just like you have silvered blades, maybe you have a silver bullet for dealing with creatures that can only be affected by magical weapons. Um, some things to think about in terms of campaign design, homebrew campaign design, as well as the how I'm going to customize it. But how do those um, players, as well as the people at large, the unwashed masses, learn of these things or how to do these things? Is there a school for it? Is it an apprenticeship? And so I think those are all valid questions for evaluating the education system. I want to say we're going to probably break armorers and weaponsmiths separate. We're going to treat armorers as armor, but also your traditional martial weapons, your swords, your maces, your hammers, your whatnot. But then treat weaponsmiths as your artificers who are developing this new gun slash projectile type technology slash magic. Sorry. It's you know, what is it? Arthur C. Clarke says any sufficiently advanced technology should be indistinguishable from magic. There you go. That's our storyline, and we are sticking to it. So I think that's where I'm going to run with this. Um, am I missing anybody guild wise? I don't think butchers and hunters need to be in guilds. I mean, maybe more of an apprenticeship to the butcher. Um, I think in terms of, let's think in terms of a noble house that has its own staff. And I'm going to borrow here from Raymond Feist's construct for um, the Rift War saga. You know, if you've got to keep, as a noble, you've got to keep, you're going to have a sword master. He's going to be in charge of your guards and your militia, be it soldiers that are barracked at the keep or called up from the local townsfolk in times of emergency. You're going to have your hunt master. I don't see that as being a guild. I think that's going to be an apprenticeship type thing. You're going to have your stable master, who's going to be responsible for the horses, the dogs, of that type of nature. Now, as far as the rest of your household, you know, your noble house, you're going to have a priest typically on staff, and most, at least the more civilized or more tolerant nobles may have we'll call them a scholar on staff, but this is going to be more along the lines of your sorcerer or your wizard, that's serving as a council type position to the royal household. So, um, in a setting outside of a a royal house or a noble house, in the case of your church hierarchy, you may have abbeys or monasteries. You might have a monastery that the abbot and the monks could be considered a militant order, or they could be more formalized style um, soldiers, soldiers of the church, knights in this case, squires, whatnot, uh, in addition to priests and monks and abbots. So there's that structure to think about as well. I'm trying to think if there's anybody I feel like I'm leaving out in that area. I think stonemasons, carpenters, wheelwrights, innkeepers, and barkeeps go together. Tanners and leatherworks to go together. Blacksmith, armorers, and weaponsmith are all going to be three sides of the same coin, but with some specialization. Your alchemists, your tailors, cooks. I don't see having a guild. I see that being more of an apprenticeship. Maybe I need to separate this list out into guilds and apprenticeships. Your miners, your fishermen and sailors, scriveners, performers, apothecary slash physician, glaziers, potters, jewelers, shipwrights, distillers, vintners, brewers, merchants, thieves. Beyond that, are we, since we're going as far as identifying the thieves guild, are we going to define the assassins guild? Back in Dungeons and Dragons expert set in the mid 70s, and then in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons first edition, before second edition came out, assassins were considered like a separate class or a subclass of thieves. So, are we folding thieves and assassins under the same roof in terms of the guild? Are we going to look at a secret society for assassins? That's one other thing that needs to come into development, is some secret societies. In this case, the Thieves Guild is going to be a very secretive society. It's yes, it's a guild, but maybe it's not a guild in the traditional sense because of its nature. Um, Yeah, I think that's good. I think that kind of rounds out our our education system quite well for our fantasy setting. If you think I'm missing something, definitely drop me an email. Brian at huskyhouserpgs.com, um, or DM me on Twitch. Whatever you think of that might be a good fit. Because I'm definitely open to suggestions. This is not a be all end all list. This is going to be a living document, something that gets referred back to and gets refined as we go on. Um, yeah, I think let's move on and talk about your sci-fi sci-fantasy setting. I think this is going to be your more traditional modern education system where your basic education system runs kindergarten through 12th grade, and then from there it would be college and university. Beyond that, I mean, and then your compulsory subjects being more extensive, your specialist schools, your religion, your trade, and your technical. Um, Work-based apprenticeships is going to be uh, individuals, individuals, guilds for the few that will exist, and unions, since typically organized labor becomes a thing once you start getting into more modern societies. I think all of these are going to require at least a basic education. There's not a whole lot more that can really be said in your sci-fi setting. But it's going to kind of mirror the modern world, if I can untie my tongue here and speak intelligently. Some nights that's a challenge. Depends on the day. So, what other education structures exist even in the modern world? We have nursing schools, we have technical schools, we have mechanic schools. Um, Religion is usually a function of theology at a university level. Um, what other specialist schools could fit into that particular mold? Pause and think about that. All right. Government structure we looked at previously. Let's talk about law and order. Who creates the laws? Law enforcement hierarchy. Trials and crime and punishment. Where are criminals held? Typically in a dungeon, and then if you have too many to put in a dungeon, you build a prison or a maze and stock it with monsters and just drop their asses off in there. I'm sorry, that was dark, wasn't it? So, some thoughts on law and order. Okay, what if we are looking at, bear with me, I'm doing a little referencing real quick. If I'm looking at, I got a book of random tables sitting here that I'm kind of referring to. Customs laws and their consequences. This is just some fun stuff that I might throw some dice just to see what this comes up with. And maybe some of our more esoteric societies. Strange and unique customs. That's a D20. I'm going to throw a 20, just a 20-sider, just to see what we come up with. And I hit a nat 20 tonight. Each citizen has composed a brief autobiographical song to be sung when introducing themselves to others. That's some weird shit. What's that roll? A 14. At dawn, all of the area residents stand outside, excuse me, outside their homes and sing a hymn to a nature deity. See, I've still got to come back and design a pantheon for my homebrew. So that's going to be on my to-do list. One more, just for kicks and giggles. Is that a 5? That's a 3. Everyone leaves a bowl of milk and a vial of honey by their door to appease fey creatures. Okay, we can play with that. How about some of the strange and unique laws? Oh, a 1. Magic shall not be used on the day of midweek. Okay. Got to revisit the calendar, don't I? 12. Oh, I'm fighting the urge to sneeze, y'all. Might have to mute my mic first. Okay. At noon every day, the city goes silent for 1 hour. Sound of any kind is illegal. You've got kids. That's not happening. 11. Hoods and hats are illegal. Okay, strange and unique punishments. Log. Locked in a room with a screeching kobold choir for 1d6 hours. Not exactly my cup of tea. One more of those. Subjected to bestow curse for 1d 100 days. Okay. So, yeah, I love random tables just because they're so random. Things to think about, things to tinker with. Let's go back and revisit, because this is going to be next time. Let me see something on the Where'd my map go? Worldographer acting stupid? Or hexographer? Okay. Session 17 gets into economics. Distribution of wealth, average wage, cost of meal, house, where is money kept, where can it be invested, financial winners and losers. Okay. 18 is family groups. Common structure, head of the family, role of older generation, younger generation, outside influences, situations that separate families and families outside the norm. So I think 18 and 19 will go together because gender roles kind of blend in with that. And then 20 is going to be employment. I think employment and class divides and social mobility will go together. And then let's get into 22 and 23, which is going to be religious and spiritual belief structure, which means I need to get my act together and get a pantheon developed. And magic. Let's take a look at 22 first, actually. Major religions, impact of religion, calendar, government, law, education, diet, fashion, family structure, and gender roles. Major festivals, rites and rituals, conflicts between religions, conflicts with society, and how religion has changed over time. Okay. Plenty to work with there. 23, magic. How magic works, limitations, consequences of using magic, who can use magic, who cannot use magic, and then how magic fits into family life, education, government, law and order, medicine, religion, gender roles, and warfare. Spell components and magical items. Okay. I think there's plenty there to work with as well for development purposes. So let's look at or revisit our education discussion. Primary and basic, college and university. Compulsory subjects, reading, writing, math. Specialist schools. Banned subjects in the general education system is going to be magic. Specialist schools for magic, religion, either Bard School or college, and then military or militant orders. And then we have apprenticeships and guilds, which probably need to be broken down. Some are going to be both, some will be one or the other. Like stonemasons, that's going to be an apprenticeship, but also a guild. Same for carpenters, wrights, your keeps, your tanner and leather workers, your smith, your armorers, your weaponsmith, your alchemist. Your tailors, I don't see really being a guild, maybe just an apprenticeship. Same thing for your cooks and your miners and your fishermen and sailors. Your scriveners, I see that probably being a guild. Your performers, probably going to be a guild. Physicians, I would say guild. Glaziers and porters, I'm going to say apprenticeship. Jewelers, that could go either way. I'm going to say apprenticeship. Shipwrights, both apprenticeship and guild. Distillers, vintners, and brewers, I'm going to say guild and more than likely apprenticeship. Merchants, going to just be apprenticeship. Your thieves guild is going to be a guild. and an apprenticeship, because there's going to be a head honcho somewhere in the Thieves Guild structure overseeing things. So I think we've got all the bases covered here. I think that's a good foundation. Your sci-fi setting is going to be basic 12-year education, and then college and university after that. Specialist schools for religion, trade, or technical, and then apprenticeships available through individuals, through guilds/unions. I think that is a good wrap for that. I don't want to start diving into Law and Order tonight, so I guess that means we're going to be a short show. So, with that said, we'll start to wind down here. Saturday, as far as I know, I put out a message right now to see if we are playing Saturday. We need to play Saturday. The following Saturday will be Easter weekend, Good Friday, leading up to the Easter holiday. So that's not going to be a game that weekend. Are we playing D&D this weekend? Following weekend is Easter. So won't be playing that weekend. Just to remind everybody, in case anybody's lost track of time. So we should be continuing our adventures in the land of Chult, seeking the lost city of Omu. I've got some surprises built in for them. I don't want to tip the scales and give away what I've got laid out for them, but we've got some nice planned encounters and some a little mystery and a little terror involved, just for the fun of it. As they're getting close to the end of the Soshin Star River into the Aldani Basin, at which point they're going to have to disembark and secure the boat, because you're not going to go any further by ship. It's going to be overland from here. So we'll get them that far and see what happens. But they're getting close. They're getting real close to their destination. So, and then after that, we'll see where we go next. I had a conversation with them about switching over to the homebrew environment, and possibly generating new characters. Matt was receptive to switching over to the homebrew, but he's not quite ready to retire his cleric yet. I think he wants to get him up there a few more levels. They're right about 8th now, so we'll see. I'm fine with it. It's their story. I'm just DMing it. It's just we need to keep on moving with that. So next Monday, the day after Easter, I will be doing a sci-fi build session with our Traveler / Starfinder world. I'll be spending some more in-depth time there because there's no game then. And then next Wednesday, of course, it will be Worldbuilding Wednesday again, and we will get into law enforcement, law and order, and then the following session will be family groups and gender roles. But all that said, if you want to play, message me. Let me know if you're interested in Starfinder, Traveler, D&D. I definitely would like to put another player group together to meet on alternating Saturdays or alternating Mondays, depending on what we're playing. You don't have to know how to play. I'm more than willing to sit down and teach the game to anybody that is willing to learn. All I ask is that you show up regularly, so that we can keep the games going, because that's what I enjoy doing. So if you're interested, message me, either at huskyhouserpgs.com or through here on Twitch. Be glad to do like a session, one-on-one session 0, and with you to help set up and generate a character, as well as if you want to get like a crash course on D&D 5e, Traveler, or Starfinder. Be more than happy to sit down and go through the basics of the game, movement, combat, options, that kind of thing. It's no biggie. So, anyways, with all that said, appreciate you tuning in tonight. Join us Saturday at 6 or 6:30 Central Time for weekend adventures with the Tomb of Annihilation, and hopefully, 4 or 5 sessions out, which basically is 2 months in real time. We'll be wrapping that game up and switching into our homebrew environment. So, other than that, have a great rest of your evening, and thanks for tuning in. See you next time.